Stop covering your eyes just because it's a little painful to look at and get in there. These things happen when we let them happen. Like when you're not introducing nuance, do your research, form your own opinions, and second guess. Get off of this easy mode, reading a headline and popping off the headline. Get yourself some context, and in your little world, you will make things better, because we don't need this big whopping change really fast. We don't need to storm the government or put tanks in the street. You just do your part. Get context. Second guess. Check these sources and stop them from spreading this misinformation and misleading you, because it's small, but it's the death by a billion cuts. After a while, it will break our world, and if we're not ready, then that's turn off the lights. We're done.
This is the future.
Hello and welcome to the Alternate Futures podcast, where we chat with indie sci-fi creators about their work, the world, and anything in between, or beyond. Today, I'm here with Greg Dragon. Throughout his youth, the one thing that stayed consistent was art in all its various shapes. He's dabbled, dived, and experienced everything from drawing and sculpting to painting and, ultimately, writing, where he's found his raison d'etre, painting worlds through prose on pages, screens, and audiobooks. Greg's writing focuses on telling human stories of life, love, and relationships in a science fiction setting. His exposure to multiple cultures, religions, martial arts, and travel lends a unique dynamic to his stories. Hi, Greg. Thanks for joining me today.
Hi, Edwin. Thanks for having me.
So I was curious, at the end of the bio, exposure to multiple cultures, religions, martial arts, and travel. And that's a lot to unpack right away, but I wonder if you could expand on that a little bit, especially the travel and the martial arts part, but I'm interested in all of it, basically.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny hearing that bio read. I had written it quite a while back, and I remember my feelings at the time was, especially with writing science fiction space opera, there's a lot of, as I guess from the reader's standpoint, you want to make sure that the author knows what they're talking about, because it's a lot of made up stuff that's based on realistic science, physics, that type of thing. So in writing that bio, I tried to, my attempt there was to try to show that while I may not have like a naval military background or anything like that, I get around, so I can at least tell some stories. It may not be like super like hyper focused on any element that people from that world could cling on to, that like typical people with that background have, but I wanted to show that with those experiences, I had something to say as well. In terms of travel, it hasn't, I'm not like a huge traveler, like we go every year somewhere or something to that effect, even though I know that is something that I would like to get into at some point. But I've had, I'm from Jamaica, so coming from that background and being able to travel places like, I've been to Thailand, I've been to, we had a little hop, skip, and jump over in Japan, but Japan's a destination that I really want to go spend some time there at some point. And yeah, around the actual country. It's funny, I joke with my wife about it sometimes, where we talk about traveling, and every time we talk about traveling, it's like you're looking at the world as the map for that. But even in this country, there's so much diversity in the states that we really could just travel state to state and get something from that as well. So it's an area where I've dabbled in, and just being from somewhere else, being an immigrant, it has given me, I guess, a bit of a different view than most people would have, that I think lends itself to my fiction. So that's why I added that particular part in there. As far as the martial arts, I like to think of myself as a lifelong martial artist. It doesn't mean I'm bouncing from dojo to dojo or collecting black belts or anything to that effect, but just a true student of the martial arts, and that doesn't necessarily mean like from a Asian background martial arts, but just martial arts, the art of combat and the code that goes around it, and the whole harmony of conflict. Maybe weird for certain people to hear that, but just the science behind self-defense and the need for self-defense and that type of thing. It's been a bit of a lifelong study, and of course, yeah, I do have my background in it as well. But even from a fiction standpoint, like going into action scenes where there's conflict, what that helps me with having that background is it's almost like method acting where you just put yourself into that situation. And there's times where I'm standing up, I'm fighting a shadow of myself, just trying to figure out, okay, I'm a small person with like not a lot of training behind me, and I'm going up against this 6'2" Hulk. What are my options here? And just figuring that stuff out, like having that background of like I've never been small to have it on the other end, but I've taught classes with small practitioners that are excellent that could take out like bigger. So all of that applies to when I write action. I take those things into mind because I do like writing a lot of quote unquote like weaker people that are trying to overcome not just the odds, but like people that outclass them. I love seeing on certain comments on either social media or even on reviews. Sometimes you'll see it where you'll see a comment like, this and that person could never do this to this other person. It's like, yeah, well, they kind of can. Like, it's how you approach it. Like, I'm not saying that the small person like swung like a hard like haymaker into this massive Hulk's jaw and that knocked him out. Like, it's nothing like that. They're doing
Right.
motions. They're putting them on the ground. They're breaking fingers. It's things like that where that background gives me something to talk about where that's concerned. So yeah, it comes from my life, but that was the attempt. There was just trying to show like, look, this didn't come from me, even though there's nothing wrong with it. This doesn't come from me like just dreaming things up and writing it. Like I'm writing some of what I know, even though it's not directly tied to the subject matter that I'm covering.
Right. Do you have a particular martial art then that you're most proficient in or most interested in?
Oh, my first style I was in was it's like a lot of folks here in the United States was Taekwondo, Korean background with Taekwondo. I I still gravitate back to that. I like Flash regardless of so even with writing scenes, I would not just like straightforward write something. Like I like the Flash. I like even with just watching martial arts movies, etc. Part of this with the fiction aspect is the show.
Right. The
And,
style, kind
and
of the dance, as it were, maybe.
yeah, like you want to look fancy getting the over, right? And that's and not I want to be clear, I'm not reducing Taekwondo to that, but Taekwondo is a very attractive style, and that was my first one. But in terms of ownership, I had an opportunity when I went to university to start a style. It's called Kung Cuongn, make sure I'm not butchering that, but it comprised of 7 different styles in it. And the grandmaster at the time was still alive when I was in it, and they really took me in almost like a family, to where just thinking of martial arts, it's hard to separate myself from that, even though I'm not like actively practicing it right now. So those are my the two that are mainly in my background, and then I've dabbled here and there. When I was younger, I was kind of it's almost embarrassing. When I used to almost like travel around my neighborhood just trying to spar with other martial arts practitioners, just to um not to beat anybody, but just to see what else I can learn. Like I was that kid. Like I really was taking those kung fu movies very seriously. So I dipped and dabbed in a lot of things, and but naturally, if I was to own one, yeah, Kung it was a really good style.
Yeah, I was gonna say it sounds like you were going around challenging dojos or something, trying to take them
Yeah,
down.
if I had that opportunity, I would. But it was like one scenario that was pretty funny to me, just looking back at like, man, what is wrong with you? It was a in our apartment complex when I was getting out of high school, getting ready to move on to university. I used to play pool in our it's a clubhouse. Like our apartments have these clubhouses where everybody can go there to do a recreational activity. If you didn't have a TV in your house at the time, you could go there. There's always a big TV. You had to share it with folks, but it's kind of like a little community center. And they had like a workout area there as well. And I remember one of the kids around the neighborhood, he and I used to always just nerd out about martial arts, etc. And I remember one of his family members or something had just gotten back from jail, and he was a martial artist, and he did kickboxing, but
Okay.
he's a real life practitioner. Like he actually kickboxes people, whereas I'm a dojo rat, you know. So I'm like, yeah, let me see how good I am. I want to spar your uncle or whatever. He's like twice my size, and we did it in the gym itself with the. There's no free weights because it's an apartment, so there was a big open area in the center with the machines around, and I just looking back at it, I laugh because he knocked me around that gym so badly.
That's
But I
awesome.
remember loving it as a kid. Like it just made me want to get better. But that's the type of stuff I used to travel around doing. Is if I found out that you're into martial arts and you're pretty good, like I wanted to see where you're at with that. So yeah,
As
that's
long as long as you survive them, I guess it's a good attitude to have to improve yourself.
yeah, no, it wasn't one of those things where it was like a kumite, like anyone's just trying to destroy each other. It was still fun and games, but that the fact that I was doing that with strangers sometimes, I just laugh at myself, like, man, you could have really gotten hurt thinking you're freaking Bruce Lee or Ryu from Street Fighter or something. It's not the case.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's so easy to think that when you're young and then you get the reality handed to you.
Oh yeah, yeah, quite. The biggest wake up call I had with that was in an actual dojo. My taekwondo dojo, I was doing really really well going up into the brown belt area, and my sensei at the time, he actually was doing competitive fighting, and not like ring fighting. He was actually like competitive fighting. I remember there was a bar here in Tampa that they had a ring inside the bar, and anyone drunk or otherwise can get in there. It was like part of the entertainment. You can go and throw down. And I remember like watching public access one day, and there was my master like on there. Like he didn't tell anyone about this. He was doing this. So just having that influence where we were being trained to actually just be like practical application of Taekwondo and actually defending yourselves, because we had someone that was doing it on the back end. But he brought back someone who had gotten their black belt, didn't pursue the several dans afterwards. He just kind of got it and left. But he was really good at the time when he left, and he came back in to show us some stuff and hockey me again, like wanting to see where he's at. Like I volunteered to square off against them. And I remember we had one of those, I forget what they're called, but they're at the entryways to temples in Japan. We had one of those at the front of our dojo. So you would come into the plaza, come into the glass doors to enter the building, and then that thing would be right there. And then you come into the dojo itself afterwards. So we always bowed to that and walk in. I apologize, the terminology is missing right now for me, but I remember sparring around with him, and he hit me with a sidekick where I caught air, like mid-air, flew through that thing and almost like went through the glass sliding door.
Oh,
That was like one of the last times where I was like, okay, like it's time to calm down, because
you got confidence anyway to challenge these people. Yeah.
Yeah.
So quick question, last question on that. If you're in a street fight, Taekwondo or Jiu-Jitsu?
De-escalation. I'm getting long in the tooth. Like it's one of the first things they teach you, and as you get older and wiser, you realize why they teach you that. Like the purpose of learning all this stuff isn't to just be like, or it not isn't to just be it isn't to be amazing at it and beat anybody that comes across you. It's really to give you a confidence to where you carry yourself a certain way and you know how to de-escalate, because most of the times you're so much better than the person that's trying to fight with you. And nowadays, like, it gets so nasty now to where we're almost back to the days of dueling, where it's weapon based now. It's blindside attacks. It's destroying you versus much different era when it was like let's fight, get it out of our systems, and then we'll be good forever afterwards. To where if I'm in any kind of conflict, my hope is that I would de-escalate. But if in the cases where I can't de-escalate, yeah, it's gonna be Kongnu that comes out. It's a lot of like I said, 7 styles there, and the type of training I had, the sensei I had for Kongnu was also a big martial arts movie nerd, and he was trying to take it back to the Abbot in Shaolin, like training all the practitioners to break steel and all that. So we had a lot of real life fight application out of that style, to where naturally I would gravitate to that. Now, if I was in front of you and you're like, hey, show me a move, yeah, I'll lean on a taekwondo for that because it looks good.
Right.
It looks
Okay.
good. But yeah, in a real fight, I'm gonna go with the natural tools that are gonna work to get it finished as quickly as possible if I'm able to, or take the L as quickly as possible and hope that someone will pull them off me.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned that, because I've heard over here in England as well that there's sort of a change in that kind of on the street approach, and it's been suggested it's because of gangs coming sort of from outside the country, moving into the country.
I read a lot of very old books. I have a big interest in the Age of Sail that came about. A buddy of mine recommended. It was the Aubrey Maturin series to me, which is a Master and Commander was a movie with Russell Crowe that they made based on that. So I read a lot of those old books, and with you saying that about the UK, reading those books and just seeing how times were, even though it's fictionalized, but just seeing how like the patriarchal ways of how things were with the I'll challenge you to a duel, or you're supposed to do this, that, and the other, and comparing it to now and the change in times or whatever. My lens is of course just from the United States, but with social media we're so connected. I can 100% see that where there's been a marked change. Like there's been a lot of positive changes. I think just as a people worldwide, we're going through a lot of the rip the band-aid portion of things, I believe, where it's extremely painful. And yeah, it kind of sucks in our lifetime, but who can say in their lifetime that they never really had like a hard transition like this is ours. But in terms of conflict and just local conflict, not even like going to the point of wars and all that big scary topic, but local conflict where, again, like on the playground, you have your playground bullies, you have your Lord of the Flies like type leaders, like the baby sociopaths, and then you have on the flip side the heroes and the saints that are just trying to help the person that gets it. Like all that is kind of, it feels like it's off the board, where you have to just be extremely careful, because we've lost a lot of that, and I don't want to sit here and blame the pandemic or anything, but like a lot of these human conflicts happen for us to learn how to resolve them, even by either by proxy or you're going through it yourself. You've been beaten up several times, so you become a bully out of it. But in doing that, after a while, you get to a point of realization that I've turned into the monster that made me afraid to wake up. We're not resolving conflicts in any kind of way like that anymore. It's either you get knocked on the head before you get started, or you get into that conflict expecting things to happen the way your parents may have told you it happened, or you've watched movies and shows seeing that, oh yeah, just dust it off and knock the bully down, they'll leave you alone. It's not the case anymore. The bully's coming back with 10 friends and they're curb stomping you, and you better hope that you wind up normal afterwards, so it's much different, much different. If people start throwing down gauntlets after a while, I wouldn't be surprised. Like we've regressed in a way where that's concerned. And yeah, just one man's opinion, but it kind of feels that way especially when I see the riffs online sometimes, where it's like, man, it's not that serious. Like, how come there's no middle ground anymore? It's escalation to like instant, just destroy them. Let's not find a common ground, just destroy them. Like very hard lines.
Complete polarization.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned the transition and kind of the Band-Aid period. It does in some ways I assuage my fears with looking back into history and realizing, we kind of feel like we're in this gradual, improvement all the way up. But if you look back to the middle 1800s, early to middle 1800s even, I mean, there was a huge amount of change, especially, let's say, European and US kind of thing as well, right? All kinds of chaos going on there, social change, countries being formed entirely, right? So there was a huge amount of chaos, and that was like 1.5 centuries ago, basically.
Yeah.
So it's not really that unusual. We just happen to find ourselves in one of those periods again, don't we?
Yeah, and what's funny about that, if you love history for all its ugly warts and wrinkles associated with it, if you look back at history, a lot of that stuff isn't even like, relatively speaking, with as long as like humans have walked the earth, from what we know, it hasn't been a long time. It has so even with what we're going through, I feel like social media gives this idea where we should be transitioning faster, or we should be better a lot quicker because we have so much access to information now. But I don't know. I don't feel like we're capable of that fast a transition. And I'm old enough to have lived through several different scenarios where the outlook of the entire world seems to be against you, and then one little change happens, and you're onto something else with wanting that to be improved, but you really haven't given credit to the fact that this other thing has changed that used to be pretty much a reality of life to you, with no out to it. So yeah, with that being said, that's why I said it's like a band-aid, because even comparing where we were in 2015 to where we are now, I think it's a huge world of difference on several fronts. And that isn't to say we shouldn't keep our foot on the gas. It's just that in reflecting, sometimes I think people who dodge history or are just misinformed because they rely on someone else to tell them half this stuff, it feels almost like it may be a different world where their expectation is different from someone that remembers a lot of these things that are really recent. Ageism bias like causes some of that, and then on top of that, like I said, one of my biggest pain points with people is the ducking and dodging of history, even when history is not to your advantage. You know, being African American, like that is something I struggle with a lot of folks. Is we have access to the internet now. We have access to, over here right now, there's this huge like banned books like distraction that's going on. And the reality is, like, if you have an internet connection and you're in this country, like, you really have access to get some context. Not like, just because this person said this on a podcast or on some news show, you don't have to take that and run with it. Take that and go do some research, learn a little bit more, and
Yeah,
then
exactly. Yeah.
it gives you such a different outlook on where we are right now, which can be super negative or super positive depending on who you're speaking to. And I want to make it clear that I'm not sitting here on some super positive cloud with that. I feel like I want to sit on a realistic cloud. Just like with talking to you about the Matcher and Aubrey thing, is being from Jamaica, a lot of lessons I get from those fictional books is how much that affected how like some of the fabric of the country, where some of our language comes from words pirates used. Like, I wouldn't have known that had I not delved into that history. Um, one of the latest ones that came about from you reading that, if it's even true, because I haven't looked it up, but I'm gonna quote it just as like a fun thing you learn, just like digging into history. One of our curse words has the word bumbo in it. Like we said, bumbleclot. That's a cuss word. I found out in reading one of these books that bumbo is grog that's like dolled up. It's got like they said it put lime in it and something else, where instead of just straight grog, it's an actual like refreshing drink, and they called it bumbo. And I'm wondering, it like piqued my interest. Like, is that where? Because as a child, I'm like, where does this bumble come from? What language did it derive from? And so all those like little things that are in there just from looking into history, where it doesn't have to always be painful. You can find these things that actually inform you about things that's going on right now. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing with technology is, at least from my perspective, is it's both hopeful and depressing to see.
Hmm.
But ultimately, I think it's a case of humanity needing to gain more personal responsibility, like you say, in learning uh, in more depth about the issues, rather than, it's become very easy to just sort of look at the surface level, the headlines, because they're spewed at us through all the media now. But
Hmm.
really, we need, I mean, this should be the wake up call for everyone to basically, take the responsibility to look into the issues more when you see something that's especially something that's sort of inflammatory or, over the top clickbait type stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. There's a lot of opportunity for personal growth, and it's each one teach one, right? Like all of us may have like a little person in our life, or may come into your life later on, and you having this knowledge will protect them from making the mistakes you would have, just either knee jerking or you are letting something beat you down that may not even be factual just because a big voice said it. One of the things I've been trying to get better at is, if I hear something that kind of irks me, happens a lot in the historical spaces. I feel like there's a lot of bad actors in historical spaces that purposefully spread misinformation. And it's turned into a good game where it's like they say something inflammatory or something that's just historically wrong, just trying to push an agenda. You take that, go do some research on that, like dig deep into it, find out for yourself, and if it's true, then you confirm it, and then you're getting mad over nothing. But if you find out the truth behind it, then it leans into so much more. You can push that reality back on someone that's in your life, or in the case of writing, it can come through. Like you can try to right the ship a little bit by adding in that context. Someone may make that quip during the dialogue, or you may put a scenario where that misinformation is at the forefront, and you show how your characters like work themselves through it to get back to the truth. Like there's a lot there, and again, we're in such a privileged time, like with information, at least for now, until they take it away.
Yeah.
Take advantage of it, and get your studies in. Like go look up the history. Like there's a lot of opinions out there, but there's also a lot of documentation that's been shared and that is being shared right now. So take advantage of it. Stop covering your eyes just because it's a little painful to look at, and get in there.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a good note to actually segue into your writing. So how did you move from your travels and your martial arts and your life experience into writing, or have you always been writing?
I've always written. Several of your podcasts, I heard other authors kind of allude to this, but it almost like the older I get, it's almost appearing as if authors like the uniform we're wearing at this point, whereas most of us are just creatives. So you can start off in one area, whether it be fine arts, music, whatever, and through expression, you may find that poetry is your jam, or writing fiction is your jam. Um, because at the end of the day, I think a lot of us just want to create and share what we've created, and get our little dopamine out of it, whatever that looks like. For some folks, it's sales. For other folks, it's getting published. For other folks, it's winning awards. Like everybody has their own reason for doing this, but at the end of the day, it's that creative spirit that you want to be that kid again, with a blank notepad and your pen and crayons or whatever, making something out of nothing, and then being able to share it. That it may touch someone else's life, or it may just make you feel a little bit better for being able to express it. I have drawn and painted, I guess, the majority of my life. Like as a child, that's a lot of what I did. Like I was able to draw pretty realistic faces, etc., very young. So that's where everyone was pushing me, like, you're a really good artist, do this, that, and the other. And at the same time, I think in terms of writing, where I started to take writing seriously, um, I attribute it to two things. Coming up, my brother and I were um, reliant on each other quite a bit, just because of the situation we grew up in, where it was just us and our mom, because it's just us, worked quite a bit. So I was taking care of my brother when I was younger, and part of taking care of my brother is getting him to sleep. And getting him to sleep was I had to tell him stories, and I used to make up, because I've always watched and read fantasy, science fiction, and that type of thing. So I remember, like, when I was younger, I created this entire world just to be able to tell him stuff, and it kind of like formed on its own throughout that. And then when I got older into high school, when they're forcing you to write, like I'm in English class and we're reading things like The Great Gatsby, Lord of the Flies, Pygmalion, that kind of thing. And they're asking you, like, write your poetry, write your short stories. That immediately, like, it was like the heavens like opened up for me, like, oh, like, I love writing. I didn't know, like, I still have notepads of the poems I wrote back then and the short stories I wrote back then. Read a lot of Conan the Barbarian comic books, so it was a lot of that, like, sword and sorcery type of stuff, and um Buck Rogers type of action, where the like spaceships and ray guns and floating platforms and all that type of stuff. But that was the start, and I think a lot of kids go through this too, where I was a very avid reader when I was younger, because my mother had a teaching background and she got me reading fast. I was reading like Oliver Twist and books that I wouldn't even look at like today, like as a kid, because that's the stuff she had around the house. So I was very well read up until you started getting to high school and you lose interest in it, because all of a sudden you're reading all the time and stuff you don't want to read.
Yeah.
But so, like, even in saying that, I fell off of writing up until close to my senior year, when I kind of rediscovered my love for reading, because in our library at the time, they had what they called the choose your own adventure books, where
Right.
you can just kind of pick your, and I love those, because it's like a video game in text, like you got to decide what happened to the protagonist, or you may end up reading like 20 pages only to have your character die, and you got to start from. Love that, love that. But that got me back into the swing of things, to where I didn't lose it after that. Like, the choose your own adventure got me back into it. Then my freshman year in college, there was a used bookstore right next to the university, and they were selling books for, like, I'm showing my age, of course, but who cares? Like 50 cents, 75 cents, stuff like that. So I was burning through, like, the Dungeons and Dragons series, like all those different authors in there, Pool of Radiance, Ravenloft, all that, Forgotten Realms. Then I transitioned out of that into, like, I read some Piers Anthony. Like, I was going through, like, the high fantasy books pretty crazy. Then I got into Piers Anthony. Did a good transition for me, where he had a book called Macroscope that I read, which was a pretty sizable tome to it, and that let me know that I really, really, like, I always loved watching sci-fi, but I was always reading fantasy. I never read fantasy. That was kind of my first stepping stone into that, and I started to discover bigger, like, bigger volumes of authors writing this stuff, and that kind of turned into me dabbling into it in it myself. And then all those old stories I was telling my brother, some of those short stories that I was writing for class, all of that kind of bubbled up into where I was just writing my own fiction. Never had any aspirations to publish it. I was just writing them almost for catharsis and throwing them in a folder. Same old story. But the difference with my story is I didn't break them out to write them and clean them up or anything to publish. It was just almost like training for later on in life, when I decided I want to give this publishing thing a shot, and it
Right.
kind of came back.
Right. You brought back some memories there with a few of those things. Piers Anthony, I used to read the Xanth series quite a lot.
Damn,
Which is
yeah.
an interesting one. Yeah, he seems to be really I don't know, he hasn't got a lot of mention, I don't think. You don't hear about
Because
his
I
name
think
much.
I think every time we break out these old authors or old directors, old actors, like in our modern social media world, like I don't know if there's anything problematic there, or but there could be, you know. So I'm always kind of like careful, where I'm like, I'm gonna drop this name, but it's not like I'm promoting. I'm just letting you know my history. This is what I
Right.
read, because I read most of the Xanth stuff, Spell for Chameleon, Golem and the Gears. I loved how he worked puns
Yeah.
into everything. I thought that was just really creative. And he really, speaking of problematic, like the reels, like I read Macroscope, but what really made me like, you know, I really want to write like a cool space opera is he wrote a series called Bio of a Space Tyrant.
Right.
And the Bio of a Space Tyrant series, again, like I'm not recommending it, but it was really a good entry point for me to start to look at um, science fiction, space opera, like military sci-fi, that kind of stuff. That before, I don't think organically I would have ever like transitioned to reading that stuff on, but coming
Right.
through Piers Anthony and the Xanth novels kind of led me to it.
Yeah. It was interesting that Xanth was, I think it was set in an alternate Florida as well, wasn't
Yeah, the map's Florida.
it?
Like,
Exactly.
you open any of those old books and look at it, it's like, oh, that's Florida with a lightning bolt going down the middle of it.
Yeah.
It's
Um,
pretty cool. It's like you're in on the joke with him when you look at these books. And I'm a big as a reader, I love anything abstract about novels. Like if it's just a straightforward beginning to end, I'm knocking myself a little bit because my books are that's fine and everything, but I really like a book where they take the extra step, like a Bram Stoker's Dracula, where you have things in there like maps and private notes, and like I love that research aspect of you're not just reading, you're part of that universe and you have to take some extra steps to kind of get the things that you want out of it.
right. It's also interesting that the choose your own adventure style seem to be trying to make a bit of a comeback. I've been seeing it in different forms on Amazon a little bit, including sort of more adult forms as well, where they're
Mm-hmm.
trying to not call it choose your own adventure, but call it something else, but it's the same thing basically. So have you ever thought of going back and trying one of your own of that?
No, because um when I think about it that way, I would, if I was going to do the choose your own adventure thing, I would almost want to be a part of writing a game or something,
Right.
or going that route, because video games are at a point right now where the narrative portion of it is so strong. I don't see why writers can't dip and dab, because at that point you're using tools that are available, right? When we did choose your own adventure, or when they were writing choose your own adventure, you're limited on how you would present something like that. How do you give someone a choice during a narrative? Whereas now we have video games that are so strong, even our phones have them. So to answer your question, yeah, I would love to do that again, but not in the form of a novel. I don't even know how successful those have been. I
Yeah.
have read some of the newer ones, and I had to leave it back in my old high school days, because I don't feel like I have the patience anymore
Yeah.
that I did back then for it.
Yeah, no, it's I'm not really sure how successful they are anymore either. And I do completely agree with the video game angle. And I do know of a number of writers who have sort of dipped into the video game writing as well.
Mhm.
So it is a good way. So what then did sort of bring you finally to start writing your science fiction toward with an eye towards publishing?
Yeah, so it's a two-part tale. The first part was going back to the video games, like when in my 20s, with playing a lot of these we call them massive multiplayer online role-playing games, MMORPGs. People that play those games, you are pretty much just writing a story through the narrative of your character. So it puts your mind in a way where you want to story tell anyway, because you're already doing it. And I was involved with one of those where the company was kind of going out of business. So we were like the last ones on the servers doing our thing. So we were making a lot of content for ourselves anyway. For people that need details, this was Star Wars Galaxies.
Oh yeah,
It,
I remember that.
yeah. So if anyone knows Star Wars Galaxies, one of the draws to that game that's different from a lot of the ones that are coming out now where it's a bunch of real people in this world that they created for us, is that Star Wars Galaxy still left it up to the individuals to make the content. It was a massive sandbox. All they gave us was different roles you can play in a Star Wars world that isn't Jedi. And it also gave you different planets that you can explore, build on, and actually lead people. It was extremely ambitious and broken because of its ambition. But those of us that are Star Wars fans thought it was the best thing ever because,
I
like,
think it was.
we can, you know.
Yeah,
No, go
sorry.
ahead.
I was just gonna say. I was thinking it was a little bit. It got a little bit destroyed by World of Warcraft coming in and sort of changing the game, didn't it? But yeah, I do love. I did love Star Wars Galaxies. It's to the point where you could be a mayor of your own town as well, couldn't you?
Yes. Okay. So yeah, So that
Yeah.
that was the big draw. It was like I love that idea where it's like we gave you the world now, and it's just like you moved into that world virtually, and it's up to you. If you want to be a millionaire, then figure out how to get your economy up. Like you said, that it allows you to build your own towns, and it's not just some fake town. Like real people actually move into your town.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You have to plan where they're putting their houses and all that. So it went from that, and what you're saying with World of Warcraft, when World of Warcraft was on the horizon, the finance department of Sony or whatever that was in charge of that game decided to probably add the world's worst band-aid to
Right.
a lovingly broken system that pretty much just destroyed everything that made it work
Yeah,
in the
exactly.
first place. Without going too deep down this rabbit hole, because I know we're talking writing, but in that, I think a lot of lessons were there in terms of sometimes the people complaining are such a minority that you may just need to leave it alone anyway and suffer that loss because your majority is going to go away when you make the and I think for Star Wars Galaxies, that's what's happened is you went from a sandbox with freedom to on the horizon is this theme park game that it locks you in, but it's actually just very not broken unlike your game. So it presents a different type of package. And now you're taking your broken game and trying to trick people into thinking it's a theme park that's that doesn't have any broken out, and it is no. Now everybody's gonna go. Like, where's
Yeah,
my characters
exactly.
from 3 years? They're not here anymore. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I loved the when I would go into the game, it would just be like, okay, what am I gonna do today? And then just sort of go from there,
Brave
right?
New World, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
I'm gonna go I'm gonna go to a tailor and get this outfit created so that the next time I show up to do PvP, I'll look a little bit more like Luke Skywalker. Like the
Right.
game gives you that kind of flexibility, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So out of that, back to my main point, when it was becoming defunct, when World of Warcraft was on the horizon, a lot of us ended up in our own spaces, either doing role playing or we were. I was running a guild, so I had to find content for people that was absolutely necessary. Our content for a lot of times was player versus player. We put up bases and then people would come and try to take our base. We try to take, there's a lot of coordination. Probably sounds crazy to a lot of folks listening, but that's the level of dedication those games took. So out of that, because I was already having to write content, I was already having to make my own character with the role playing. We're doing really nerdy things on the side. Like I had a um almost like a journal for my main character that was going through his life and tribulations and everything that was going on. And I was having other people from the community come in and they would comment and read on it. And they really built up my confidence. Because again, I hadn't really tried to publish or do anything like that. I've always just written, and it was with no like kind of serious critique outside of my school. So this presented a situation where I was having strangers read my work and giving their unfiltered opinion on it, and it made me feel confident that I can tell a story, and that's really all I needed to keep going. Like I transitioned out of that, like the game went away, but I kept writing about this dashing rogue with the gun and all that, and I was sharing it with friends and family members through email, like here's my story, what do you think? And that was kind of the beginning of it. That got my confidence up. And what really got me into self-publishing is I at the time back to me always writing. I had a huge project that I was working on. It was a blog online that I was just covering issues. It was at the time I was looking at it as like men's issues, nothing problematic, knock on wood, with that, but just confidence was always a thing I knew guys struggled with and but could never really talk about, not amongst ourselves, and definitely in general, because there's an element of us that makes fun of that. So
Right.
that vulnerability and some of the things that we carry on with, especially some of the problematic things, I wanted to dig deep into that. So I had a blog where I would write from my personal experience from it. I would invite people on to write, and so I was doing like 5 days a week, 5 days worth of content every week, 500 to 1,000 word entries. So I was really, and it was like a one-man show. um I'm sure you're hyper aware of that with what you do. It's just
Yeah,
it's
it's a
like
lot
your
of work
job.
for one person. Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't even know what I was doing with it. I just wanted it to be better. So I was trying to reach out to the other sites that were doing similar thing, like the askmen.coms and there's all of these other sites out there that were covering it on a bigger level. And I was seeing if maybe I can grow it into that. But it was still writing. It wasn't fiction writing, but I was getting my chops in, learning how to put things together, taking those critiques, because if you write terribly, people will come on and let you know. So that kind of gave me my chops, but it also allowed me to meet a couple actual authors that were doing their thing. And one showed me a book they had put together and self-published, and I was very impressed with it. Like very, very impressed with it. Where it's like, oh, you didn't have to go through that crazy phase of like 20 years of rejection just to get your one work out.
Right.
Because it wasn't a fear of mine. I just didn't want to play that game. I've already said a lot about my background, but I had a good amount of it where I was an entrepreneur. I was a web developer, entrepreneur. So that whole hustle, I never wanted that as a part of my creative outlet, because that would really kind of crush it for me. Not that I'm against rejection. Like I've had rejection in other fields and other things I've done, but for writing, it was like playing that game. I had read Stephen King's On Writing book, and all that just I was just like, I don't want to play this game. Like I'll just write, and that's enough for me for now. Like in terms of something for a career that I can grow into, maybe the blog will be it. But it was still an outlet for my writing. But when this author friend showed me their work and I saw the presentation, I was just really impressed. So I asked for some advice, and they didn't handhold me. They just told me in so many words, like, "Hey, Amazon has this thing called KDP that's set up. They have all the material there for you, and any help you need, just reach out to me." And I'm a person where if you say that to me, I'm not going to reach out to you until I've exhausted every freaking avenue, because
Right.
I don't want to be a pain in your butt at all. So I did that. I analyzed the book. I went to KDP. I made an account, and then I started just the same thing I'm telling people to do with history. I just researched, and it got me into some very good forums and Facebook groups where I could just be on a fly on the wall and see what everyone was doing. And then, yeah, that book I was sharing out with friends, etc. I was like, let me reset this and try to write an actual story from scratch that's about this orphan that's like making their way through, and like I wanted to do the whole hero's journey thing where it's like I'm gonna take this orphan and turn them into the galaxy's hope, and real generic plot that way, but let me see what I can do with that. And um yeah, I left work every day, and for 3 hours every day I was going to, I think it was Borders at the time when they were open here, back when we had bookstores.
Right. Yeah.
And I would sit for 3 hours with my laptop and my caramel macchiato or whatever, and I would just write into the wind, man. Like you know, wife texting me or alarm, whatever it is, would tell me to stop. But even now, like talking to you, looking back at then, I miss that version of me where it was just all here just needing to get out. The only thing that was slowing me down was my fingers.
Yeah,
And
I remember a period like that as well. Yeah.
oh, to be able to write like that again, where it's like, I just give me my time, and it's coming out. You know, it may be flawed, but it's coming. Like now, it's so much like, I wouldn't say second guessing, but we put so many guardrails around how we do things that, like, my process even now is so different. Before, I would write like whatever 100,000 words, 80,000 words, and then try to pour through it myself to take out the mistakes, send it to a copy editor, get it back, and like just looking at how I operated back is so different from now, because now it's like you finish the chapter. My process now is the next day I'm gonna read that chapter before I even start to put my words down, and like I'm refining as I go on, and depending on your style, some people tell you that's terrible to do, but for me, what that does that helps me out is it removes a lot of that second guessing out when it comes to, before I send it to a copy editor, I want to be well versed in what I wrote. I don't want to get it back from her like chapter 3. I'm reading it and it's like, oh man, I called him Edwin, but he was Edward in chapter 1. Why did I like you?
Right,
You run into the, so it removes that where I can feel comfortable, and the copy editor brings my work back. I do like a text to audio like reading. So like now I'm just like the audience and I'm listening. I'm trying to take author Greg out of it and hear it through. But back then when I used to just be like just vomit that book out, like I really miss being able to do that. But that's what I did, and I ended up publishing a pretty flawed book out of that first round, all of those sessions. I wrote it, you know, everybody in your life tells you it's great and you feel good about yourself. And my wife and I were just laughing about this the other day, that I did a whole photo shoot for the cover. You know, like I was in the driver's seat. I thought I knew what I was doing. Like I did all this research, and my daughter is in ROTC. It's like a junior military deal in school. So she had like her jacket with the pins and everything. So I did a whole photo shoot using her jacket, and my graphic design background, I took it into Photoshop, like did all this work on this cover because, you know, was wanting to put us that stamp on this thing that I created. And yeah, I published it. And like a lot of people, you need to kind of jump in both feet first to kind of realize where you need to reset and come at it at a different angle. And that was that book for me. It was called Anstractor. Anyone that may be listening to this that knows me knew that was like a pretty big art project for me. And in retrospect, looking back at it, if I was to meet young Greg and give him any advice, it would be, or to any new author that may be listening to this and want to hear any kind of advice with that, is if you have one project that's like kind of near and dear to your heart, you may just need to be a little bit patient with it. Even if it's finished, keep it in a drawer for now. Like get some stuff out there. If you don't want to like clog things up with this huge like tome that is flawed, you know, start off short, start off with some anthologies, that kind of thing. The critique helps. You need the critique, because off of Anstractor, my critique came from other authors that were pretty harsh in these spaces that I was in, but I needed that tough love to get it to where I'm at right now. But the reviews at the time, it was a feeding frenzy for self-publishing. We're talking, this was around 2013.
All right. Okay.
We're hitting pretty
really
hard
kicking
back
off.
then. Yeah, like the successful people were pretty freaking successful, and the ones that weren't were being told that like it was a different landscape. It wasn't a lot of like you know, tiptoeing around at that time. It was like self-publish it and it's gonna sell. Like there was a lot of that going on, where when your book isn't, you start to look at like, why? Is it my cover? Is it my blurb? Maybe I'm not as good as I thought. You know, it's some of those chops. And I felt like with the way I started, I did the trial by fire approach, which is typical me. That's how I like to do things. But if I had to do it again, that particular project, I don't think I would have started with that. Coincidentally, that project has led into the series that's actually my more successful series. Or I said
That's the Hellgate series, right?
Yeah, because the title character, Anstractor, Raffian, his idol and the person he wanted to be the most like was this lady Hellgate, who was a pilot that was a hero of the wars before his time. And so when I wrote Raffian's story, of course, with it being flawed, I ended up writing 3 books. I ended up writing over 300,000 words to deliver that. And again, this came back from stories I used to tell my brother, a little bit of the experience I had being a guild leader in Star Wars Galaxies, and the entire universe just kind of built out of that background. So there's names in my head that I'm familiar with that comes from stories I told my brother. So it's almost like the world exists in my head. And so I was able to crank out 3 books relatively fast before course correcting on, dude, no one wants to read this. Like take a different approach, that kind of thing. Because then I wrote also a offshoot book called Blade of the Lucan that was about Raffian's wife that I think maybe 3 people read it, after it was self-published. So started out really rough with that. But going back to Hellgate, the series that has done me a lot of good in this latter half of my writing career, she was the mentor, and I had written a short story at the time for publishing. It came out around the same time as Blade of the Lucan. And the feedback that I got, I think a lot of that was through Goodreads that I got some very harsh feedback. I needed to hear it. I know we tend to, as authors, we tend to pick on Goodreads because it's like it's the Mos Eisley of review sites. It kind of feel like you either get the
interesting description.
yeah, the GIF heavy, you suck like reviews, or the very flowery, you're the best thing since Stephen King. Like you get pretty much everybody on there, but some of that harsh stuff, I needed to take those bumps, and I did, and it made me kind of reset. Where after that series didn't do much, I had kind of my like temper tantrum book, I call it. I tell people one of my biggest fears is that I don't do very well in this thing, and I have a temper tantrum book that ends up being what I'm known for. That's happened to so many writers. One of my favorite books, well, let me not say the book, one of my favorite movies that came from a book is A Clockwork Orange. And that was a short story, and pretty crazy short story. You almost need a dictionary to read it because he made up his own language, that NADSAT stuff. But it was great in being like an example of, I think he wrote it almost as a, I wouldn't say a middle finger to the world, but I know that what came about to make that book happen wasn't that the author's name is skipping me right now, but that he wrote that as something that he would add to his catalog. I felt like that was the middle finger book, and that's the book. That's the book. So many writers. Or another good one is Pillars of the is it Pillars of the Earth? I think it's called, where that wasn't that author's main thing. They just wrote that as like a project they wanted to do, and that became like what they're known for. Yeah. So I was having one of those moments, and I did have one of those books after I did. It's not hyper successful, but I did one of those after the space opera series didn't do well. I just wrote a straight up crime novel, like based off of things that I've seen and been around. Like I wrote a first person, extremely violent short story. I mean, not short story, it's more like a novella. It was like 60,000 words, if I remember well.
Was that the Data Maze one? No,
it's the Factory. It predated the Hada Maze one.
Because I was wondering how the Factory fit into your backlist, because I didn't see
it fitting
anywhere.
It doesn't. That's why I'm saying that was the middle finger book, where it's like, okay, like I suck at space opera. Tell you what, I'll write the stuff that I've consumed a lot of, and we'll see how that goes. And got a lot of good feedback out of that. But like, I don't want to write this. Like, this is not what I want to focus on. Even now, like to this day, I get people asking me like, when is there going to be a sequel to the Factory? And to be honest with you, I have like 30,000 words written to a sequel, but I don't ever plan on putting that out there. Like it was a period of time where I just needed to get that out of my system, and I'm glad you love it. But actually, that's what transitioned into the Hada Maze, because I'm a big organized crime like armchair historian. Like I love across the entire globe, like looking at organized crime structures. Because I mean, in the back of my mind, like they're not much different from certain systems of government. It's
Right.
just it depends on what side of the law you fall on. You're still doing the same things.
Yeah.
So a part of me always wanted to write like a good mafia story or a good rags to riches, you know, the boys from the neighborhood make good type stories. Like I've always wanted to write one of those, and that's what the factory was. It was the factory is about a um, what we term a square, which is just like a person that follows the rules. He went to school, did all the right things, but he came from a neighborhood where that isn't really respected and kind of idolized. And then because of the situation that he had at his job, it switched him to the dark side, and he went to the dark side and became amazing at it. And that's pretty much the premise of it. But a lot of people really like that book, and I wonder sometimes if it's just because it's first person, because I know there's like a divide with some people really like to put themselves in the shoes, and some people are okay with a narrator. And my first person books get a different type of feedback, I find, than the other stuff that I write, because the Hada Maze isn't the Hada Maze, the Judas Cipher, that series isn't first person, but it's written with almost that in mind, because when I wrote those, the theme in my head is noir, like a
Right.
that flowery monologue and the rain and the deep dark alleys and the like that's the Hada Maze stuff for me, and it was so fun to write that. Like if there's anything I could be stuck writing forever, like that stuff really registered with me, and I think it came through in the writing because it ended up being received a lot better than the other stuff that I was trying. Um,
So did that then, I mean, the factory then led into the basically what's the Synth Crisis series?
Yeah, so yes. So I had written The Factory. There's another series that I was trying to make work.
The Neon Eclipse, is that one as well, or?
No, that's a newer one. So
Right.
so just historically I did the I told you about the Anstractor series. That was Anstractor, Phasers of Anstractor, then Supreme Leader of Anstractor. That's the trilogy. I've taken those down. For anyone that may be interested in those, I do plan to bring them out again at some point, with a little bit of some TLC, tender love and care to the editing, and making it a little bit more of what I was envisioning now that I have more of the tools to be able to make that happen. But at the time I wrote those three, and I mentioned Blade of the Lucan, and it kind of did one of these where it kind of went up with Anstractor, because I was just, it was timing. I started at 2013, and I really feel 2011 to 2013, if you can tell a story, like your craft may not be the greatest, but if you can tell a story and your editing was like decent enough, a lot of people gave you the benefit of the doubt. I saw some of those reviews where they're like, we see you trying,
Right.
we love the story, but yeah, the craft ain't there, you know, like you get those, but they were still buying your books, so you got a
Right.
lot of like major success
Not so
out of
much
that.
anymore, right?
Oh no, like now you have to show and prove or have a marketing background to
Right.
make it. I know that sounds really negative and everything, but it's just the reality of the maturity of this community. Like at the time, Amazon was brand new to a lot of folks with the KDP thing. I know a lot of people hate Amazon and they point to other places like Google Play, etc. But at the time, it almost felt like Amazon was the only one really giving us a chance. Everyone else was like, you smell funny and you look weird, like go over there. Like we're not
Yeah.
buying books, it's not official. Like if Oprah didn't like mention your book, who are you? You know, it felt a
Right.
lot like that. So it was almost like we had each other and that was it. But it was like this competitive atmosphere that was just getting like crazier and crazier and crazier. So yeah, so just like looking back at that and coming out of it, the Anstractor series presented, I guess, a bit of a false positive for me in how my books are being received. So that's why I kept writing them. I thought, oh, they like this, I just need to give them more and I'll do better. but it went up a little bit, then it dipped really fast. Like down by the time I was at Supreme Leader of Anstractor, I was like, okay. Then in doing while I was writing those books, because those were my only focus, NaNoWriMo, the National Novel Writing Month, another thing that came out of this self-publishing community. In November, we were just challenging ourselves to doing 50,000 words within those 30 days. And being as prolific as I am and loving challenges, it was a match made in heaven. I didn't realize I needed pressure to do my best writing. And that's something I had to grow into learning, because those 30 days, I cranked out a book called Rewired, where I was telling a story about it's an old trope, but I wanted to put my own unique twist on it. I had some experiences dating in university, and I wanted to show how someone may not look as nerdy and awkward as Hollywood presents, but may have a lot of those things going on with the awkwards of dating, finding dates, and what they're willing to do to overcome that. And I put it in the point of view where this kid goes to university, meets a girl, it likes her a whole lot, but then she kind of blindsides him with I have not just a boyfriend, but a boyfriend that's living with me. And while we're kind of on a break, I'm not going to tell you about it.
Right.
It breaks his heart, but at the same time, he's in this robotics class. It's in the future, and he's had this opportunity where the class project is, we're giving you an android. We want you to trick the class at the end of the session that the android is sentient. So get it. You're to train this android to be as close to a human as possible, so that when we run our tests, if yours is the most realistic, you'll win. And the story is about the kid took it to the next level and went ahead and just made it sentient. And to the point where the story, because it ended up being a trilogy, it stopped being his story and became her story.
Her story, right?
Because the more she grew into humanity, he was declining in his humanity because he had to make some sacrifices to make her real. She needed realistic skin. One of the things with those futuristic androids is they had gray skins to differentiate them. So he had to sell a part of himself. I don't want to give too much away, but he had to sell a part of himself in order to buy that for her. And I think Spike Jonze made like a really cool short film that reminded me of this book a little bit. Just to give reference to what the story about, it was like two little computer people, and the one kept injuring themselves and losing parts, and the partner kept giving something away to make them whole. So by the time you're at the end, the partner that's giving everything away is just like a monitor, which was their head,
Right.
And the other person is like a sum of their parts. And that's kind of what this is about, where Trisha the android becomes human and ends up having to take care of the person that created her, because they gave up pretty much everything in order to make this happen. So the class project just kind of went to the side. The obsession turned them into, so.
That's an interesting concept, though, because it feels like you have a little commentary on sort of where society's maybe going right now in some ways, at least parts of society. I mean, there are like there's the AI, and then there's the robotics, and then there's the, let's say, companion dolls, for example, and they're all in the process of merging for that particular market as well.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's exactly the thinking. You have the sex doll market, which will always lead the charge in terms of the physical aspects of how do we fool people into this being real. But at the same time, you have AI doing things that is making our life better. They're trying to make it to where you have a robo clerk that can answer all your questions. So with something like Rewired, and to your point, like when you start to marry those together, you get closer to that. Are we creating this life that may eventually replace us down the road? So I don't sell that doom and gloom as much. I see it as, let's look at this realistically and what may be the cause of this. Like usually we get to points like that because we're trying to fix a part of ourselves that we deem flawed, and we take it too far to where it's starting to kind of almost like take place of us or whatever.
Yeah, because it does feel like the metaphor of selling your soul, more or less, right? Selling parts of yourself to the machine in a way. Yeah, I think there's I don't know if you listened to the interview. I think it's Susan K. Quinn who had a series, who had the series on the with the ascendants. Humanity
Mhm.
had ascended and essentially had given up their souls, so they lost their creative ability effectively, and they needed people who were not ascended in order to sort of give them that creative aspect.
Humans forget we need diversity in order to continue to grow and improve. So when you get this tunnel vision or you get locked in, with Rewired, it was obsession, right? His obsession became, I must make this mate that's ideal because then I won't have any of these pains that I'm dealing with. It starts with that. And then over time, we start to trick ourselves that this is the main reason why I'm doing this. This is the main reason why I'm doing this. And it keeps growing into something else. So by the time you're at the end of the road, like I said, Rewired is a trilogy. It's Rewired, Single Wired Female, and then Wireless. By the time you reach the end of Wireless, it's such a different world than where you started out with in Rewired that it kind of completes the loop where you're like, is this series about Trisha or is it about Brad? Because like it started with Brad and it's like, but if you pay attention to what Brad's going through and what Brad's motivations are, you realize that you can't really blame him. It's just the human process of obsession. If we, he isolated himself because of the rejection, and he had this goal in mind that just kind of got out of hand, and to the point where yes, he created a life from it, but is it for the better of humanity? Because now you have a replacement for essentially mates. Like you've created a replacement for mates. So what does that say for reproduction? So there's a lot of things in there that's implied.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it would be interesting to have an entire discussion on just that topic. Your
yeah,
books do sort of, yeah, have sort of each series sort of has particular issues that would be interesting to discuss. Yeah.
I think that goes with I'm a pantser,
Okay.
even though I dislike the term, but I pants with guardrails, if that makes sense. So what's funny is I've tried outlining when I did Anstractor, because a lot of that was head knowledge again from the stories I've told leading up to it. You get to a point where you will hit a wall. I think most pantsers will hit that, especially if you're several books in and you need a Bible. You need to start
Right.
writing your world Bible. You need to. So even when I outline now, which I do, it's not an outline that I follow very well. The outline kind of becomes my it's like a planned map in my head. I know how it's going to end. I know some of the beats that I've mentioned in my outline, but creating the story still remains organic. It just kind of gives me a good um just signal as to where I'm going to end up. Because now when I just straight up pants and just sit there and write, sometimes
Yeah.
like where's this going? Like where is this going? Yeah.
Yeah, I
But
found that I'm a jigsaw puzzle writer. That's what I call
me
it.
too. Yeah, that's what
So
I've turned
yeah.
into. Yeah,
Yeah, so you
yeah.
got to have some kind of outline, even a crude outline. Otherwise, you have no idea like where these pieces are necessarily going. You got to slot them in, right?
Yeah, you run the risk of rabbit holing. Like, why is he going on about the description of this weapon, or why are we on this person for 3 chapters? You start. So my jigsaw a lot of times, again, like taking advantage of this age that we're in. We're not like restricted to paper typewriters and whiteout. I every time I'm somewhere, I have my cell phone handy or my laptop handy. Whenever things come to mind, I put it down. I put it down. So by the time I get back at my desk and I'm starting to put a chapter together or something, there's so many snippets of reference that I have like pages of this stuff. It may even just be dialogue. I remember there was one time where my wife's father was just like waxing poetic on the political sphere. And I was just in the background, just writing everything he said down because I was like, man, this is brilliant. I didn't copy that for the book, but it let me know how someone of his age thinks, where I'm like, got it. Like now if I have some old salty captain that's complaining about like, what the cadets are doing, like I could totally like mirror that type of. So I'm always documenting, I'm always writing, but it isn't to say that I'm going from A to Z writing that way. I'm just filling in my toolkit. So when I do hit those walls, like the newer series that I've been working on is you had mentioned it a little bit, which is Neon Eclipse. Even
Right.
now with writing Neon Eclipse, it's I have a almost like a patchwork of things that I can fish from, because it's not easy to just write from beginning to end with this new world and the situations that's coming in. But with respect to time and what we've been talking about, if it's not immediately clear, there really is always a point to my books. Um, I don't have an agenda, I promise you that. I like things to have a bigger picture, because that's, as a reader, that's what I love. I like that this is the narrative, the GI Joe, like grow, like the little saying they say at the end, like that's the type of, like, I like finishing a book with just thinking, I'll pick on, even though it's unrelated to self-publishing, I'll pick on the Maturin Aubrey series that I mentioned, the Master and Commander. Super ancient world, nothing familiar to me in there, but it drives home this brotherhood where even when you're not blood relative to someone and you have this harsh world where men are just made to kill each other, there's still like space for grace. There's still space for that camaraderie and that whole father figure to the rest of the crew, even though they're not blood relatives and you're stuck together on this vessel for like 6 odd months, etc. So driving home that point that you can still be very much a human, even with all that going on. Like, I love stuff like that. I'm not a big fan of just reading something and I was entertained and then I'm just done. Like, I wanna think about it afterwards. And I try to bring some of that across in my books, without going all Deus Ex Machina or any of that. Like, I want you to leave and have something. I get dinged for it sometimes. Like, some people like to have everything written out for them, like completely clear. But I like having that element where you're like, I wonder what Theo did after she left Helga's ship. Did she like I have, or she came from rough beginnings and she was able to do this. Like, maybe I'm able to do that. Like, that's, the way how she overcame that situation. I could apply that to my life. Like, that's the stuff that makes me feel good if I can bring some of that across with the books that I write.
Right. That's excellent. Well, that's probably a good place then to move on to the next segment, as we're getting a bit long as well. But that's an excellent summary of your work. Um, so the big questions. There's no lightning round for now because I'm trying to I was trying to shorten this down, but I
Yeah,
think
I
we're
know
gonna
I'm
have
long-winded, so you have
Okay.
to cut me down. Like, cut as much as you want, please, because I'm gonna
No, it's
I
all
talk.
good. It's all good.
Yeah.
So I got a few big questions for you then, before we wrap it up. And so the first one is, so you have more or less 4 series, I think, if that's safe to say. And that would be the
Yeah.
Hellgate series, which seems to be more or less like a sort of galaxy spanning series. Is that kind of safe to summarize it?
That's very safe. But the plan for that series, which I'm sticking to, some people may not like to hear this, but the plan was for 9 books.
Wow. Okay.
I want to stop, but that isn't the end of the universe. It's just the end of Helga's immediate saga of growing from this awkward cadet thrown into the special forces like hell to being like this badass, um, just taking charge commander. And that's the transition. Is I want it to be 9 books, and then I'll add more after as a secondary series. But yeah, that's the first one. Right now, the latest one that is out is book 7. So I have 2 more books to write to
Okay.
consider that
Getting
series
close.
complete.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, and then you have two series, the Synth Crisis and the Neon Eclipse series,
Eclipse, yeah.
which are more or less cyberpunk,
It's
cyberpunk
cyberpunk,
with the
yeah.
crime
Love
elements and things like that, right? So what I'm wondering is, so you have cyberpunk versus the Galactic Empire. These are both potential futures of humanity in a way, right? And they
Yeah.
could coexist as well, of course. But from where we are now, looking forward, in your opinion, which one is more likely for humanity?
Space opera is more likely because we are living cyberpunk. It just looks different from William Gibson's vision. It or Neil Gaiman, depending on where you started your cyberpunk, or Philip K. Dick, whoever your cyberpunk start is. That world is kind of trope to death. love it to death. Like, because I mean, I was a kid in the '80s. Of course, I'm gonna love it. It's a lot of neon, um, a lot of that influence, DeLoreans and all that. The Metropolis influence with the flying cars and the evil corporation. Like, that is our view in fiction of cyberpunk. But if you look at what makes cyberpunk, we're living it. And that to me is why, I'll be honest, like the Galactic Empire sells really well, whereas cyberpunk is very hard. It's a very hard space to break into, and that's why there's two series. There, the Hot Amaze one with the Judas Cipher, that trilogy I'm extremely proud of, and the people that have read it like it very much. But I based that one in Tampa Bay, so I can write a bit of what I know. We don't have those big sprawling buildings that abides to that aesthetic, but it's still, high tech, low life, which is the key for cyberpunk. But if you think about our world, wars are breaking out. Governments are kind of crazy right now. People are eating each other online, and we're online.
Yeah.
We're online. We're worried about AI. So how much further into the only thing that's missing because of the aesthetic is we're not putting chips and stuff into our body, which Elon Musk is working on.
We'll get to that in a second.
Yeah. So I feel like we're there. So I can't say cyberpunk is the future. It's not.
So you're saying cyberpunk's not the future because it's already the present, basically.
Yes, it is.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
so being that the Galactic Empire kind of angle is hopefully our future, perhaps, rather than extinction. What do you think the top 3 hurdles we have to overcome within humanity are to have a chance to get to that Galactic Empire?
Yeah, the first one is science.
Of course. That's why I said 3, because that would be obvious. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some of these things we write about. There's no way it's happening right now. Like people living in space, like we have a hard time staying up there for a significant amount of time as it is. So we have to figure out how human bodies can function in 0G for like a super, super long time. What does that look like? We have to figure out things like how we work out our nutrition. The thing why I put space opera so far ahead is because a lot of the things we still write about and the readers consume almost as if it's realistic are things that we made up in order to address a lot of the deficiencies we have right now.
Right.
My series, my series is similar to the Star Wars and the Battlestar Galacticas, where you have these massive warships that have transitioned from a war into being the open reality of everybody, military rule. Everybody comes up onto that, and you're perpetually in space. Like touching a planet is actually a privilege. We are nowhere near that at that point right now. The overcoming our mess as a world, where we're at each other's throats so much that it eats into the progress. Like the space race slowed down to nothing. Big, massive, like sociopathic billionaires are in charge of that right now. So that's not a good lead into the future of space travel, because it's going to be very personalized, very, very Elysium, where the rich will be in space and leave us here to eat ourselves after a while, like going that route. And that's so far in the future to me. So yeah, that's my thinking, is the science needs to be there first. The right people need to be in charge of those type of programs. Like I feel like racing to space for the sake of maybe a competition between countries, that can be positive because it influences growth in technology and why we do things. Right now, where it's billionaires over everything and doing it for pet projects or stuff, may look like it's leading us to getting to that point where our space operas are, but I don't believe it is. I feel like it's a start and stop. And we have to get to that point, almost like Star Trek, where the warp, I think the warp drive was created in someone's backyard. Like we need that warp drive person to be like, hey, new tech, we can jump like systems all of a sudden. Right. Now. I don't see anything like that. So right now it's super, super fictional, and that's what makes it fun, right? Because it's a little bit more flexibility, whereas something like a cyberpunk, because we have so much reference now, you almost roll your eyes at it, like why why does the car have that? We don't need that. Like we
Right.
drive,
Yeah.
you know, with space opera, we still have things that are still so fascinating and fantastical that you have to look at it as a future, because we're nowhere near it.
Right. Do you think on that pathway to that future, because you spoke about right now it's being sort of controlled from almost central authorities, you know, individual people largely. Do you think it's a matter of inspiring the population now, kind of like the moon landing did in a way? Because, you know, I think we've been sort of scourged, and so many people are just asking the question of why would we even go into space? And I find that very depressing, that question, to be honest, because there's so much potential there. And I really feel like the sort of involvement of the majority of the population is now being excluded by so many of these powers and these groups. And do we need to sort of maybe wake up and inspire the population for some of these big projects?
Great question, and that kind of, it's funny because it marries the worlds a little bit. I'm obvious a big video game player. Um, in reading cyberpunk books and narratives always have a strong lesson behind them. It's never ever about look at this fancy neon sign and, you know, people being jerks to each other and walking around as cyborgs. Like that's just the window dressing. Like there's always something about not letting big powers like dominate everything. Like that, in order for those big powers to exist, there needs to be this underclass. And usually those narratives come from that underclass where they're trying to either fight back or just exist during those that dystopian reality or whatever. And where we are right now as a society, you know, just kind of likening it to cyberpunk, I see a lot of that where we're at a place where we have so much access to information, but we're being discouraged from looking into that information. We're drawing lines in the sand even where they don't belong, because like if I was to write this fiction of our current day world, it would be so easy just looking at what we've been through.
Yeah, I know. It almost writes itself, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And I want to preface by saying I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I hope I'm not. So
It's
I'm
hard
gonna
to
say
tell
a few
these
things
days.
just to parallel what we're going through. I'm going to make a couple references, but I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not sitting here thinking it's any of this is happening. But if I was to write this fiction, if you wanted to get people away from thinking that we can get anywhere with space opera as a future, you would make it where you convince people that we're it. This is it. This is it. Like what you see in the sky is just this nice canvas of black with these twinkling things, and there's nothing else out there to worry about. Just worship and listen to the sun. Like that's all you got to worry about. Everything is localized. Just concentrate on you and yours. Like F everything else. It's you and yours. Like don't worry about my family, my people, my country, my. That doesn't give you a situation where growth can happen. One of the books that I read recently that I was super impressed with, I think it's called Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky, I think that's his name,
Right.
where he presented a situation where we've frigged the world and we need to go. We need to go find somewhere else to, and the scientists take these like monkeys and insects and everything else in order to kind of like reseed a new earth for us to, because we've broken ours. And that entire narrative just drove home so many things to think about for me, where a lot of this, a lot of our works come from this scenario where we've broken the world. Dystopia is that, and even space opera. Like there's a reason you're in space. There's a reason why you're perpetually in that warship. You've broken your world. You need to go find another one, or you're trying to colonize another place and they're fighting back against you. But it's all predicated on bad things happening on the surface. So here we are, we're living it. We're all our news sources, it's doom and gloom with everything that's going on. It's making you kind of shore up and hunker down, which doesn't give you that exploratory, that wonder, that stargazing where, you know, how do I get to the moon? You know, like that's not happening anymore, because you need that thought process in order to build your first rocket. And we're not concentrating on that right now. We're concentrating on, you know, are we going to nuke each other tomorrow? Are we going to who's going to run the country. Like no one has time anymore to create that warp core that's going to and eventually become a federation that's going to make humanity better than we are today. And because we're so defensive and we're so hunkered down, the wrong people are creating that narrative. So your media sources are now having one particular message. Your governments are having one particular message. And then you leave it at that point, who's focused on space? Only the people that have the time and resources at that point. The billionaires aren't worrying about half the stuff that we are, to have that stand in the way of being able to look out at the moon and say, I want to go there. I want to go toast somebody in orbit or something like that. For the rest of us, it just looks like this impossible thing that's limited to sci-fi. Oh, that's make-believe stuff that you're writing over there. So the scientists get hurt for that. Yeah. The stargazers that need to become scientists get hurt for that. So it locks us into a cyberpunk world. And I feel like there would need to be a huge revolution of thought in order to take us from a cyberpunk back into that thought process of the space race. Like, and I'm only speaking from a US perspective because that's where I'm at. Other countries may be a little bit different, like they may be pursuing things in space, but from what I see in my day-to-day, I feel like an element of that is missing. That wonder to go to the stars, not because your world is broken, but just to see what's out there, to see
curiosity, exploration.
Yeah.
And I really do agree with when locking us in with when you talk about locking us into the cyberpunk world, because it almost feels like as well that, let's say someone did invent the warp drive in their backyard, it almost feels like some mega corporation or collection of mega corporations will just come down, steal the technology, bury it, and bury the person who invented it, basically.
It becomes a movie Elysium. They'll go build some awesome station with all the healthcare, and we'll be down here
exactly
eating dirt. I mean, whatever we can do, you know.
Well, that is literally what Richard Branson and Jeff Bezos want to build the space stations, don't they? Yeah. So last question, and speaking of the millionaire or billionaire, sorry, that we didn't just mention in the list, Elon Musk. So his Neuralink company has just attempted their first human implant of the technology they're calling telepathy. Now he's advertised it as a way for people to interact directly with technology, specifically regarding people with disabilities who might be able to use it very, very well. And it will be an aid in that, but it'll also be an aid towards perhaps the metaverse, which has pros and cons, of course. What do you think would be the greatest harm to humanity that would result from this kind of technology linking to a metaverse, and then the greatest good that might come from something like a metaverse?
Oh, good question. I think just like with everything else, my fear with any of that is that the news we hear is maybe like a year into what's really going on. So when you start talking about chipping people, my science fiction mind immediately looks to the military. If you read my books, it should be pretty obvious that I got a lot of love for the military, not because I'm a warmonger, but because, you know, these forced situations that we put people in, we still put bodies in boots on the ground places. So it affects families, it affects lives everywhere, and it's predicated on what the rest of the world is doing. So if you have the wrong people making these technologies and you have the wrong reasons for them, there's not really an easy way to unring that bell. So in terms of a worst case, chipped soldiers, chipped situations where we're using it to really harm each other, the whole aspect of AI goes, like, the entire spectrum is from worse than hell scary to like amazing solar punk goodness. We all are living well, right? So that's my scenarios. If we use it to kind of influence military rule, change the I mean, it's inevitable it's going to happen, but it's going to change the landscape of war. Those old ship books I read pretty much drive home the point that at the time that was the huge technology, was these tall ships. And once that went away, another world power took over, because that was so when you start influencing chips and people, it's like, who's who doesn't care as much about their people? Who would actively just chip everyone and put them on a battlefield? Like if we look through our U.S. lens, where everything we're trying to do is democratic and this, that, and the other, you know, you can be like, well, we'll fight back against that and we won't take it. But there's places where they can just straight up chip. So that's the worst case. The best case is exactly what they're saying it's doing. You know, it's what they're telling us it's doing, which is if someone is paralyzed or have a disability, it can improve their quality of life. Who wouldn't want that? Getting older, I'm looking at things like you losing your eyesight, like Dune. You know, Dune, they're making movies out of that. But one of the things with the series of Dune that really, I was like, man, I wish we had a technology is when they would bring people back from the dead, their eyes would be one of the things they couldn't bring back, the sight. So they would replace the eyes. And I'm like, you know, as our eyes get poor, imagine if we could just replace our eyes. Like that's one thing you don't lose. You're always able to see, even if you're born without the ability to see, like we find a way to where we can give. So the idea of chipping and replacing parts, augmenting like chrome inside your body, grafted the bones, like all this cyberpunk stuff that we're looking at, that's of course why we want it to happen. Like being able to have people able to walk who lose the ability, even if it's an exoskeleton attached to the limbs, you know, however we go about doing that. If it's about improving the quality of life, then yeah, that's where we want to grow. But there's always nuance. There's always two sides to the coin. So that exoskeleton that's allowing my loss of mobility in my legs, that allows me to walk around, sit and stand when I please, it's using to augment a soldier to let him run like maybe like 10 miles an hour or something like all the time, or he's synced up to weaponry to where he can launch. That's the balance. And yeah, that's where I see it, where as we get, you know.
So I was gonna say, it's an interesting point you made that the best case scenario is the one they're telling us, because that makes you think everything else that's likely to happen is going to be worse than that, right?
Or it's already happened.
You've got the bar there, and you know that everything likely that's going to happen. I mean, that's the best case scenario, which some of it will happen, but everything else that'll happen is going to be worse than that. It's going to be somewhere on the scale that's worse than that, which is frightening. Like you say, and with the soldiers, and you can imagine. So you're suggesting, for example, a totalitarian power chipping people for soldiers. But what I'm thinking, let's say with the U.S., we'll go with the U.S. and let's say, because the U.S. will probably be a strong adopter of, you know, kind of this kind of technology that allows you to communicate with machines and stuff. But then you think about the last several elections and how social media was used to subtly influence people's thoughts and decisions in their perspectives. And you could think that a chip then could be abused by some subtle messaging that sort of keeps going into your brain, right? And then you can manipulate the population into which direction you want just by popping that out there, couldn't you? So, which
sounds like fiction,
thought.
but it could be happening, right?
Not enough fiction, yeah.
yeah, and that's why, and that's like going back to your question. That's why I say we're cyberpunk. It just looks different than we've always portrayed it. It's not the 80s with cybernetics. It's something else, and we're living it. So it's not as sexy, I guess, as how we
never is. It never is.
Yeah, it never is. Yeah.
Yeah, as science fiction people, this should be the world that we should be dreaming of, but unfortunately it's turning into something that it could be very easily a nightmare.
Yeah. But you know, I don't want it to just be all negative. You know, we all know that since the beginning of time with predictions, and especially with fiction, the way we write things, paint things, and portray things into the future, there's always an element of that. There's bad actors and good actors every time, but yeah, in terms of a categorization, space opera, I wish it was sooner than later, but it's definitely later.
Yeah, I think
it's later. I want it to be Star Trek, not all the other things I mentioned.
I think ultimately with the cyberpunk world, it's up to us, isn't it? It's up to, as we said, the people. Like, we can adopt these things and we can use them and we can allow ourselves to be manipulated, or we can take charge of them, and we can use them for the more positive ways. And it's ultimately up to us as whether we allow ourselves to be herded or whether we sort of take charge, isn't it?
That's a really great point. And to add to that, with what I said earlier, um, that's a beautiful outlook. And as a people, humanity doing that, I think it would fix a lot of our problems. But where we fall short, where it's unfortunate, is that we are making things faster and more convenient with social media. It's like I'm telling everyone to go do their research into historical things, make sure that you know what you're getting upset about, if it's either valid or whatever. But at the same time, it can make us a little lazy, and lazy is where problems happen. When you're letting somebody else tell you how to think, when you're letting somebody else tell you what is what. If they're telling you 1+1=3 and you're just taking that at their word, you're an idiot. Like everybody else is gonna look at you as an idiot, and you don't feel like you're an idiot. You feel like you're informed because that particular individual may have like 100 million followers that's riding on their every word. So I think respecting nuance and being okay with not feeling slighted in speaking about certain things would help us to fix a lot of what's going on. But us being lulled into this sense of just apathy and taking things right to the chin without any kind of nuance or any kind of grace for folks eventually does feed a cyberpunk world. When I write about cyberpunk, in the back of my mind, like Neon Eclipse, when I wrote Neon Eclipse, I wrote a whole scenario that's not in that book where I was like, where did we go from today and things that are going on that would lead to this world where an organized crime family pretty much runs this futuristic city? Like, how do we get there? And just imagining like the world powers and the wars and everything that went on, it kind of comes back to this where I was like, these things happen when we let them happen. Like when you're not introducing nuance, everyone is all like revolution, but they're not doing, like, if you look back at most of these revolutionists that everybody is like wearing on shirts, and like they're educated people. Like a lot of them are educated people. It's not, a lot of them aren't like, just coming off the streets and fighting back against the man. A lot of them went to university, saw the world, did not like how the world was going, and then they became like the leader of the folks that's going through it. So be one of those yourself. Like, do your research, form your own opinions, and second guess. Get off of this easy mode, reading a headline and popping off the headline, which is it's clickbait or something like that. Like, get yourself some context, and in your little world, you will make things better because your child that's looking up to you will know that their parent actually gets that second and third opinion before making, it could be someone that's a proxy. It could be a friend of yours that admires you, or it's like, you know what, Edwin's always doing his research and I've never seen him go astray. I want to be more like Edwin. You need to kind of take that on. And I think as individual citizens everywhere, that would make the world better. Like, we don't need this big whopping change really fast. We don't need to storm the government or put tanks in the street. You just do your part. Like, get context, second guess, like check these sources and stop them from spreading this misinformation and misleading you, because it's small, but it's the death by a billion cuts. Like, after a while, it will break our world, and we will be in the space opera. You better hope at that time we can do, like, we can exist in space, because if we're not ready, then that's turn off the lights. We're done.
Cyberpunk dystopia at that point.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great point to end on, I think, because we're about out of time. It's been great chatting with you. Again, unfortunately, we are out of time, but because I think there's lots of topics we could go on for hours on.
Yes.
But before we go, perhaps you could tell us sort of what you have coming out next, where we can find you online, and if you have any upcoming events you might be at, anything like that.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. So to find me online, it's my name, just one word.com. So gregdragon.com. Website has all my latest works and the ones that I've collaborated with on there as well. There's also some free books you can pick up some of it has been from the past where, me talking about flawed projects, some of those have just transitioned to free, so you can get an idea, at least a little bit about how I write. The projects that I'm working on right now, we mentioned Neon Eclipse. There's been 2 books in that series so far, Neon Eclipse, and then there's Clipper's Edge. And I am finishing the 3rd book, which is called Blood on Chrome Frets. If you read the 1st book, that's a reference to a popular song that's like the Assassins, like that's their anthem. So this one is a pretty great book that I'm really having a good time writing. And then a little bit later on this year, I want to complete Helga's 8th book for the Lady Hellgate series, which would be titled Codename Hellgate. Again, that book series is going to have 9 books, so this is the second to last one. So I'm pretty excited to write that. And then also, if you want to support me and some other indie authors you may not have heard of that write pretty quality books, in my opinion, check out our anthology series. It's called Crooked. It's edited by author Jesse Quack, Kwak. Just take a look at Crooked 1 and Crooked 2. There's a lot of dystopia, a lot of crime in space short stories in there. So it's a good recipe sampler. And I mention it because I said there's 2 books in the Neon Eclipse series. I wrote a short story for the 2nd anthology called K-City Cowboy, which is about the title character. And so if you don't want to just try out a whole book, pick one of those up and find me in there. And I think it will give you a good idea of the type of books I write. But and one more project that Kindle has, this Vela program where you can write short chapters. I am completely redoing Rewired. I said I wrote it as a NaNoWriMo book and ended up publishing it. There's some other parts of that story I wanted to tell, and I'm doing that as a Kindle Vela series. It's called Wired for Love. So yeah. So again, gregdragon.com. Find me everywhere at Hobdragon, HOB, as in beta, dragon. That's where I am on all social media. I'm also on Reddit. So just Google my name, Greg Dragon. Drop some quotes on it. You'll see me pop up and all my credentials that you may need to see if you want to try me or not. Oh, and I didn't mention audiobooks. That's where I do probably the best in. Please check out my audiobooks. I have some really talented narrators. I'm a big audiobook reader myself, so that's important to me. For the Hellgate series, I have a dedicated narrator, and she's amazing. So please check out the samples there. And I'm on YouTube too for the samples. So if you just want to hear, if you would like what I write, like Greg Dragon on YouTube and see if you like it.
Well, that's awesome. Thanks a lot. So Greg Dragon, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Evan. Thanks for having me. And I appreciate this opportunity. I know I talked your ear off, so hopefully you get some good material out of this, and I don't get too many people mad at me with my little conspiracy theories here and there. But yeah, this was fun.
And thank you for listening. Information and links related to this and all episodes are available at alternatefutures.co.uk. I'm also over at Substack under Alternate Futures, where I post articles on science fiction, socio-technological issues, and futurism. You can subscribe for free or sign up for a paid account if you'd like to support the podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, why not share it with friends, writers, and other sci-fi fans you know? And if there are any indie sci-fi creators you'd like to see featured, send me a message at podcast@alternatefutures.co.uk. Once again, I'd like to thank you for listening, and I hope you'll join me on the next episode.
This is the future. Human error. Evolution. This is the future.